I first got the job at Carparelli's just over a year ago, and I've been working there ever since. Carparelli's is one of the most exclusive and high-end restaurants in the city. Sometimes people will wait for a few months just to have the pleasure of eating there. I work as a dishwasher there, so I'm usually kept quite busy. Most nights, the restaurant will serve around 100 people, and so my job is to wash the dishes, dry the dishes, and then put away the dishes. I don't ever really get to see what goes on inside the restaurant because I'm often stuck out in the back. So I only have a rough idea of the type of customers that we serve. There is a small window in the kitchen that allows you to see out into the dining area, which I can look out of whenever I'm putting away the plates. From what I've seen, nearly everyone wears either a tuxedo or a nice dress. I've even seen some men wearing a top hat, and I've noticed that quite a few of the patrons will also be wearing some kind of fancy gloves. That is the type of customer we usually get at Carparelli's. Rich and fancy. I don't really mind my job too much. It can be quite physically demanding, but it pays well. It pays quite well, in fact. I get the regular shifts and work long hours, so when my paycheck arrives at the end of the week, all my hard work seems worth it. I've made friends with a couple of the chefs, but the one person that I can't quite seem to get along with is the head chef. No one knows his name. Everyone just calls him Chef. Chef isn't too bad to work for. When I first started, I expected him to act like a Gordon Ramsay, so I was pleasantly surprised when I found out that he's a lot more relaxed and easygoing when he's in the kitchen. Sure, the kitchen can get a bit heated, but like the old saying goes, if you can't handle the heat, then get out of the kitchen. And I think I can handle the heat. The main attraction at Carparelli's is the head chef's special meal. It's an exclusive meal that has to be specifically ordered and is only allowed to be cooked by the chef and only the chef. No one else is allowed to know what this meal is, and it's such a closely guarded secret that the chef will actually go into the other room to cook it. When he's cooking the exclusive meal, he will always keep the door closed so that no one can look in and see any of the secret ingredients and how the meal is cooked. So last night, my shifts began like any other. I get to work and start by cleaning any dishes that may have built up throughout the day, mainly dishes created from the chefs preparing for that night's service. I clean those until 6 o'clock. That's when the service begins. It's usually about a half an hour after that I began cleaning the customers' plates and cutlery, so it was around 6:30 that the plates began to be brought in to be washed. So there I was, happily washing the plates in the sink, then loading them into a large tray that would be put inside the dishwasher. I picked up a large stack of plates that were waiting to be washed, and I placed them into the sink. While I was carrying the plates to the sink, I could feel that something was left on one of the plates. Probably just a little bit of food. It's supposed to be the waiter's job to properly clear the plate of any food before I wash them. But tonight, there was a fairly new waiter working, so I excused the missed food on the plate and got to washing them. I'd placed the large stack of plates into the full sink, submerging them into the water. I began with washing the top plate, and then placing it onto the tray that goes into the dishwasher. I repeated this with the next few plates, but then I felt something floating in the water. It must be the food that was left on the plate, I thought. I tried to ignore it, but would sometimes feel this small clump of food brush against my hand as I was washing the plates. Then, it brushed up against my hand one more time, but this time, I noticed that it felt a bit strange. It was quite hard and fairly long. It didn't really feel like it was a bit of food. I decided to grab whatever it was, preparing to throw it straight into the bin. I reached down into the sink, and I found the mysterious floating object. I placed my fingers around whatever it was, and I felt kinda strange. It was quite long. It felt hard, but the outside was quite soft. And what was that at the end of it? Is that a nail? I quickly pulled the strange object out of the water and looked at what it was. My thought was correct. It was a nail. A fingernail, actually. And it was still attached to the rest of the finger. The long index finger had a large cut at one end of it, where it had been cut off from the rest of the hand. There was still a bit of blood coming out of the end of it, but it was also, because it had been submerged, it was beginning to wrinkle. As soon as I saw what it was, I let out a loud scream and dropped the finger back into the sink. My scream must have been quite loud because, within a few seconds, the head chef was standing behind me, wanting to know what I was screaming about.
"What the hell are you screaming about?"
I heard Chef's voice say from behind me.
"There's something in the sink. It's a finger. It's someone's finger,"
I replied. Even I could hear the fear and disgust in my own voice, and Chef must have heard it too, because he quickly tried to assure me that it couldn't have been a finger that I had seen.
"There's no way that's a human finger in the sink,"
he said, trying his best to sound comforting.
"Here, let me look at it for you."
Before I could say anything, Chef plunged his hand into the sink, felt around for a second, and then pulled his hand back out. He had the finger grasped in his hand. I saw him take a look at it and his face changed. He realized that I was correct. There was most definitely a human finger in the sink. He looked at it for a moment. Then he just said one sentence before he walked away, still holding on to the finger.
"Oh,"
he said quite casually.
"That's not supposed to be in there."
As he walked away, all I could think was, no, it's not. It's still supposed to be attached to a human hand. I was a bit taken aback by how casually Chef had picked up the finger, and I wasn't quite sure what he meant by, "It's not supposed to be in there." Where was it supposed to be then? Was he expecting it to be somewhere else? I saw the head chef carrying the finger through the kitchen, but it looked like he was trying to hide it from the other workers as he walked through. I watched him until he disappeared around a corner, and I knew that he was heading to the room where he usually prepares a secret meal. He reappeared only a moment later, and he seemed to just get back to work, unfazed by the fact that a human finger had been found in the sink. I don't know what to do. This seemed like it was a police matter, but Chef was just acting like it hadn't happened, or that this was normal. I knew the finger had been brought in on one of the dirty plates, so I guess the finger probably belonged to a customer. So why wasn't Chef reacting with horror or fear? I think Chef saw me staring at him because he looked over in my direction and then began to walk towards me. And as he approached me, I managed to ask him,
"Is the person who lost the finger all right? Shouldn't we call the police or an ambulance? Or anybody?"
Chef then just calmly replied,
"Don't worry. It's being taken care of. The customer's okay. Matter's being dealt with. But if you wish, you can go and sit down for a while. I can understand it might be a bit traumatic to find what you did. So take a bit of time off to recover."
I was beginning to feel quite sick, so I took him up on his offer and I went to sit down in the small staff lounge area. It was good to sit down, but something was still not right. Why was everyone so calm about the situation? Why were the police not here? Surely I should be getting questioned about what I'd found. But I wasn't. Instead, all that was happening to me was that I got to sit down for a bit. But it seemed like Chef still expected me to work after this. This was clearly not right. So I decided to go and see the head chef and tell him that I was going to go home. There was no way I could finish my shift, and I really just needed to get out of the restaurant. I got up off of one of the staff lounges and began to walk down to the kitchen. I was just about to enter the kitchen when I heard some voices. They were coming from inside the room that Chef uses to prepare his secret meal. The voices were muffled, but when I got close to the closed door, I could make out what they were saying.
"Please, it was a mistake. I didn't mean to leave it sitting on the plate. I'm not sure how it happened, but I promise it will not happen again."
One voice was saying. It was hard to make out who the voice belonged to, but I was pretty sure it was one of the waiters, the one who was still fairly new.
"No, you're right. It won't happen again,"
another voice said. It didn't take long to figure out that that voice was Chef's. He continued speaking.
"But that doesn't solve the dilemma we're facing. Someone's paid for the chef's special, and you know the rules. One man's payment becomes another man's meal. I needed that finger for the customer that ordered my special. Do you really think I can serve that after it's been sitting in a sink?
No, I know you can't serve it now.
The waiter replied. I could sense the fear in his voice. He knew he had made a huge mistake, and he was very fearful of what that mistake would cost him.
No, I can't. But the customer's already paid, and we can't make him pay again. So, I will have to get the ingredient from another source.
I heard Chef say, a hint of anger in his voice.
No, please. I will find you another. Please, anything but this.
The waiter yelled out. It sounded like he was begging. He was desperate. I then heard a scream come from the other side of the door. It was a scream of pure pain. The sound was muffled by the door, but because I was standing with my ear to the door, I heard it quite clearly.
No!
I then felt the fear rise throughout my body. My heart rate got faster and I felt the urge to run away. I hadn't quite processed what had happened on the other side of the door, but I knew that I wasn't supposed to hear what I just had. I felt my legs suddenly moving, and before I knew it, I was running through the kitchen. My flight response had kicked in. I kept on running through the kitchen and out one of the side doors that led outside. Before I got out of the kitchen, though, I ran past the small window that looked into the dining area. The first thing I noticed when I glanced out the window was a fairly large group of people sitting at a table, all dressed in suits. What was strange about this group of people, though, was that all of them were missing most of their fingers on one of their hands. The man with no eyes keeps staring at me. He appears every night at exactly 10:16. I don't know what it is about that time, but it is the exact minute that he wishes to be seen. I believe that he is present and watching every minute of every day. Something about that exact minute allows me to see him. He watches me, with the two black holes that should contain his eyes. He only appears for 1 minute then. As quickly as he appears, he is gone again. The two holes that reside on his otherwise normal face are the deepest and darkest black. Like looking down a deep tunnel, you aren't sure where it leads to. The rest of his face is normal. He looks like a normal man, in his mid-40s. He wears an old black suit, the same color as the holes on his face. I first saw the eyeless man a few months ago. I was in the shower, fairly late at night. After a long day at work, I'd used shampoo in my hair, massaged it into my head, and had just started to rinse it out. I closed my eyes and placed my head under the hot stream of water. But when I came out from underneath the shower head, I reopened my eyes, and I saw him standing there, on the other side of the bathroom. He was motionless, but his body was facing directly towards me. The deep black holes in his face were the first thing I noticed. I knew that, despite his lack of eyes, he was staring directly at me, watching me. I stayed put in the shower, staring back at the man, trying my best to not gain too much of his attention. I thought that it was an intruder, so I was trying to think of my next course of action. I needed to get out of the shower, get to a phone and call the police. The plan formulated in my mind, as just as I was about to execute it, he vanished. Directly in front of me, the man with no eyes disappeared. I knew then, this was no ordinary man. This was something else. I turned off the running water, and I reached out to grab my towel. After the first incident, I tried my best to convince myself that it was just a figment of my imagination and not actually real. I would have convinced myself of that if it weren't for one thing. The fact that he showed up again the following night. I was just climbing into bed when he appeared the next day. He appeared at the foot of my bed. The two black holes stared directly into my own eyes. His facial features were blank, but just from the way he was staring, I could tell he wanted something. He was longing for something. Something I had that he didn't. And he disappeared again, right in front of me. And once he had departed, I had actually checked the clock. 10:16, it read. At this stage, I wasn't aware that it was the exact same time, down to the minute, as the previous night, but I knew it was a similar time. Each night after that, the man with no eyes would manifest himself in front of me. Without fail, he would appear in front of me, just stare towards me. He never moved, never spoke. He just looked directly into my own eyes. I didn't know what to do, but one thing I did know was that he didn't seem to be a danger to me. Sure, he was scary, but my fear had slowly subsided, and I almost awaited his arrival each night. I welcomed him. In the lead up to 10:16, I looked at the clock in anticipation of his inevitable visit. I even tried talking to him, but was never given a response in return. I grew used to him, paying me a visit and gracing me with his presence. I even grew to feel his presence even when I could not see him. I often would feel his stare throughout the day. I would look around, expecting to see him, but he wasn't visible. I knew he was there watching me, but he never allowed himself to be seen. Only at 10:16 was I allowed to see him myself. Only then I could see his longing stare, looking straight into my eyes. I'd convinced myself that he was no danger to me, just an innocent guest. But that changed after the events of last night. The clock struck 10:15. I'd been checking the clock for the past half an hour, waiting for him, and now it was almost time. Only a minute to go. I was sitting in the armchair in my living room, a small glass of wine in my hand. I was looking out across the room, waiting for him to manifest himself into the center of it. I checked the clock one last time and witnessed it change from the number 15 to the number 16. It was time. And just like that, right on time, the man with no eyes appeared before me. He stood in the center of the room, his body facing towards mine. His eye holes were looking right into my eyes. I tried to greet him with a friendly hello.
Hello?
But he didn't respond. He did do something, however, that he hadn't ever done before. He took a step towards me. Just a small one, but it was definitely a step. I flinched as I saw him move. I wasn't sure how to react. Should I be worried? Or should I be pleased that he wanted to interact with me? He then took another. At this point, I did feel afraid. The black holes in his face were still looking straight into my own eyes. He took another step forward and then another. With each step he took, the holes in his head became clearer and clearer. They were the darkest color I'd seen and seemed to burrow deeper than his head. Like looking off into space or staring down into a canyon. The abyss almost seemed inviting, though, and I couldn't stop myself from staring into them. He was coming closer and closer, and each step that he took, I felt more enticed by his eyes. The holes seemed to stretch on for miles, much further than I was capable of seeing. The black space showed no sign of color or of any light, only complete darkness that spread out endlessly. The man was now almost next to my face, and all I could now see was the black. His eyes were almost up against mine, and so I had no option but to stare directly into the holes in his head. Something began to appear in the black abyss. It was faint at first, but then began to materialize more and more. It was myself, floating in the black space, only I looked different. I, too, only had holes where my eyes should be. My eyes were missing. I also looked strangely familiar. I looked almost identical to the man with no eyes. I had never noticed before, but we bared an uncanny resemblance to one another. In fact, in that moment, I thought that I was him. Suddenly, the vision disappeared, and the light returned to my eyes. I looked out across the room at what I was seeing. I saw myself sat in the armchair. My eyes seemed to have returned. The only problem was that I was standing on the other side of the room and no longer in my body. I looked down at my body, and I saw that I was wearing a dark black suit. I spent most of the day now staring at myself, just watching. I know that my eyes aren't there, but my vision is still clear. I can still move around and do as I please, but I don't think anyone can see me. Only for a small amount of time each day. I can't help but stare at myself. I watch even more intently. I know that the person that used to be me can feel me watching. They await my arrival each night, but I don't make a move. Not yet, anyway. I know I wish to switch back soon, but I need to bide my time. For now, I will continue to watch, longing to have my eyes return to me.